Have you ever driven somewhere so quiet you could hear your own heartbeat over the engine? That's how I remember that road. No radio signal, no streetlights, just gravel crunching under my tires and cornfields stretching out forever in the dark. I want you to remember that feeling, because by the end of this, you'll understand why silence out there isn't peace. It's a warning. 2 years ago, I made the mistake of taking a shortcut through rural Missouri that almost cost me everything. I was driving back from my cousin's wedding, alone, around 11 at night. My phone told me the highway was backed up for miles because of construction, so I let it reroute me through what it called a faster path. That faster path turned out to be a county road so narrow that 2 cars could barely pass each other. No signs, no other headlights, just me, my old Corolla, and mile after mile of farmland swallowed by darkness. About 40 minutes in, my phone lost signal completely. The little bars just vanished. I remember laughing it off, telling myself I'd be back on the highway soon. But the GPS froze on a blue dot that wasn't moving, even though I was still driving. That's when the first knot formed in my stomach. Then my car started sputtering. I know engines. I'd worked on cars with my dad since I was a kid, so when I heard that specific stutter, I knew it wasn't good. I pulled over onto the shoulder, gravel crunching under the tires, and popped the hood. In the glow of my phone flashlight, I saw it right away. A cracked fuel line. Not something I could fix on the side of the road. Not something I could fix at all without a part I didn't have. I stood there in the open night, cornstalks taller than me on both sides, and realized I hadn't seen another car in over half an hour. I decided walking was smarter than waiting. I remembered passing a mailbox a few miles back, so I started walking toward what I hoped was a farmhouse. The night was warm, but I was sweating for a different reason. Every few seconds, an owl or some animal would call out from the fields, and each time, my whole body would flinch. After maybe 20 minutes, I saw a porch light. Just one, small and yellow, glowing at the end of a long dirt driveway. I nearly cried from relief. The house was old, wood siding gray with age, a wraparound porch that creaked as I stepped onto it. I knocked, and a man answered almost immediately, like he'd been standing right there waiting. He was maybe 60, wearing overalls, and had this calm, steady way about him that put me at ease instantly. He said his name was Walter, and when I explained my situation, he nodded like it happened all the time. "Phone lines are dead out here half the year," he said. "Come on in, I'll get you some water, and my boy can look at your car in the morning." Everything about that first hour felt normal. Walter's wife made me a sandwich. They had a dog, an old golden retriever that rested its head on my knee while I ate. They talked about their grandkids, about the corn harvest, about how the county never bothered fixing the roads out there. I remember feeling almost embarrassed for being so nervous earlier. They set me up on a pull-out couch in a back room, and I fell asleep faster than I expected, exhaustion from the wedding and the walk finally catching up to me. I woke up to the sound of a truck engine outside, way too early, still dark. I checked my phone. For 12 a.m. I lay there for a second, telling myself it was probably Walter's son heading out to check on livestock or something. Farmers wake up early, that's normal. But then I heard voices, low, urgent, right outside the window of the room I was in. I couldn't make out words, just tone, and the tone was wrong, sharp, arguing but trying to stay quiet about it. I got up and looked through the curtain. Walter was standing by the truck with another man I hadn't seen before, someone younger, maybe 30s, wearing a flannel jacket. They were gesturing toward the house, toward the window I was looking through. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard my name. The stranger said it like a question, and Walter answered with something I couldn't catch, but his hand went up in a calming gesture, the same gesture you use when you're telling someone to wait, to be patient. Every instinct in me said something had shifted overnight, and I didn't know what, but I knew I didn't want to be there when they came back inside. I grabbed my shoes, my phone, my jacket, and I looked around that little room for another way out. There was a window on the far wall, painted shut from years of neglect, but with enough force it gave. I pushed it open as quietly as I could, and climbed out into the cold morning air, dropping down onto wet grass. I didn't take the driveway. I cut through the edge of the cornfield instead, moving parallel to the road I'd walked in on, staying low. Every stalk that brushed against my arm felt like a hand. I don't know how long I moved through that field. Time stretches strange when you're scared like that. At some point, I broke through the tree line and found the county road again, and I just ran. I ran until I saw the faint orange glow of a gas station sign in the distance, easily 2 miles down the road. The gas station attendant let me use the phone to call for a tow truck and, eventually, the sheriff's department. When 2 deputies showed up, I told them everything. The car, the walk, Walter's house, the truck, the voices. One of the deputies got quiet when I described the property. He asked me the exact road name, the color of the house, the dog. Then he told me something that still makes my skin crawl to this day. They'd been investigating that property for almost a year. Not for anything supernatural, nothing like that. For something worse. 3 other travelers, stranded on that same stretch of road over the past 18 months, had gone through that house. 2 of them were never seen again. The third turned up 2 counties over, disoriented, unable to remember most of what happened to him. Walter and his son ran what the deputies called a network, preying specifically on stranded drivers, people whose cars conveniently broke down on that same isolated stretch, people nobody would immediately go looking for. My fuel line, they later confirmed, showed signs of tampering. Small, deliberate damage designed to fail slowly, just long enough to strand a car exactly where they wanted it stranded. I think about that porch light sometimes, how warm it looked, how safe. I think about Sandwich and the dog resting its head on my knee and how easy it was to believe I'd found kindness in the middle of nowhere. So if you're ever driving down some quiet country road and your GPS reroutes you somewhere it shouldn't, and a porch light appears just when you need it most, ask yourself one thing before you knock on that door. Why is it the only light for miles? You know that feeling when you're driving through farm country at night, and you pass a house with just one light on, and something in you whispers, "Don't stop here." I used to think that feeling was just nothing, just nerves. I don't think that anymore. I grew up on 60 acres outside a town in Kansas, so small it doesn't even have a stoplight. Corn on one side, soybeans on the other, and our house sitting in the middle like an island. My dad used to say the nearest neighbor was a scream away if the wind's right. He thought that was funny. I used to think it was funny too. This happened the summer I turned 22. I'd moved back home for a few months between jobs, staying in my old room, helping my dad with the property since his knees had gotten bad. Normal stuff. Feeding the chickens, mending fence, mowing acres of grass that never seemed to end. Quiet life. The kind of quiet you don't appreciate until you don't have it anymore. It started with the fence. We had about 1.5 miles of perimeter fencing, mostly for keeping the neighbors' cattle from wandering onto our land, and one morning in July, I found 3 fence posts pulled clean out of the ground. Not broken, not knocked over by an animal, pulled out, like someone had grabbed them and worked them loose by hand. The wire between them was coiled up neat, off to the side, like whoever did it didn't want it in the way. I told my dad. He walked the line with me, frowning, and said maybe kids messing around, maybe the neighbor's boy. We fixed it and didn't think much more of it. Out there, you get used to explaining things away. You have to. Otherwise, the quiet gets to you. 4 nights later, our dog Bo wouldn't stop barking. Not the bark he did at raccoons, short and bored. This was different, low and steady, aimed at the tree line past the west field. My dad went out with a flashlight and his shotgun, walked the fence, found nothing. Bo wouldn't come back inside for almost an hour. He just stood at the door, facing the dark, growling at something none of us could see. At the time, none of this felt like the start of anything. It felt like a string of small, strange, disconnected things. That's the part that still gets me looking back. How ordinary it all seemed while it was happening. The following week, I was in the barn around dusk, feeding the horses, when I noticed the loft ladder had been moved. We kept it latched to the wall when it wasn't in use, simple as that, every single time my whole life. That evening it was standing free, propped against the loft opening, like someone had climbed up and just left it there. I climbed up myself, heart going a little fast, expecting nothing. I found a folded horse blanket that didn't belong to us, and a half-empty bottle of water, still cold. I didn't touch either one. I backed down that ladder so fast I nearly went through the rungs, and I ran to the house and told my dad someone had been living in our barn. He didn't laugh this time. We called the sheriff's department. Out where we lived, that meant a 40-minute wait for a deputy to drive out from town. He walked the barn with us, looked at the blanket, looked at the water bottle, and told us what we already suspected. Somebody'd probably been squatting in there a night or two, maybe passing through, maybe not. He told us to keep the barn locked, keep a light on, call again if anything else turned up. Standard advice. It didn't feel like enough. Out there, keep a light on doesn't mean much when your nearest light is a mile away. That night, my dad and I took turns staying up. Around 2 in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table with all the lights off so we could see out into the yard, I watched a shape cross the open ground between the barn and the tree line. Not running, walking, slow and deliberate, like they knew exactly where the ground was uneven, and exactly how to avoid the motion light my dad had rigged over the porch. I didn't wake my father. I don't know why. I think some animal part of my brain told me that any sudden movement, any noise, would turn this into something I couldn't take back. So I just watched. I watched a full-grown man cross my family's backyard in the dark like it was something he'd done 100 times before, and disappear into the corn on the far side. I told my dad in the morning. We called the sheriff again. This time they took it more seriously, sent 2 deputies out, walked the property in daylight, found a flattened path through the corn, about 30 yards in, leading to a spot where the stalks had been trampled down in a rough circle. Cigarette butts, trash, a view through a gap in the corn straight into our kitchen window. That's the detail that still wakes me up sometimes. Not the barn, not the ladder. That gap in the corn was cut on purpose, at exactly the right height, aimed exactly at the one window where our family sat down to eat dinner every single night of my life. They never caught him. The deputies said it was likely a drifter, somebody who'd probably moved on once he realized we knew. That's the official version, and maybe it's even true. But my dad put up motion cameras that week, and put in for early retirement that fall. And we sold that land 2 years later to a corn operation that never sends anyone to live on it. Nobody in my family talks about exactly why we left. We just did. I think about that gap in the corn more than I'd like to admit. How much patience it takes to sit in the dark, night after night, cutting a window into a field just to watch a family eat dinner. How close somebody can get to your whole life without you ever hearing a single footstep. My Aunt Carol died in March. She lived alone out past Route 9, about 50 minutes from the nearest town you'd actually recognize the name of. Corn on one side of her property, a tree line on the other, and maybe half a mile between her house and the next one. I hadn't seen her in years. We weren't close, but she left the house to me in her will, which meant somebody had to go out there and deal with it. That somebody was me. I drove out on a Friday afternoon with a trunk full of empty boxes, and this plan to knock it all out in one weekend. Sort what's worth keeping, bag the rest, call a hauling company Monday morning, be back in the city by dinner Sunday. Simple. The house itself was fine. Old, smelled like dust and mothballs, but fine. What got me was how far apart everything was out there. You don't realize how much you rely on hearing other people's lives happening around you until it's gone. No traffic, no neighbors' TVs through a wall, just wind moving through corn that was taller than my car. First night I didn't sleep much, not because anything happened, just new place, unfamiliar sounds, the usual. Around midnight I heard what I figured was a dog barking somewhere off in the distance. Then nothing. I didn't think about it again. Saturday morning I met the neighbor. His name was Dale. He came walking up the driveway around 9 with a thermos of coffee, said he'd seen the car and figured he'd introduce himself. Older guy, maybe 60, friendly enough. Told me he'd known my aunt for almost 20 years, helped her with the fence line, brought her firewood in the winter. Said she was a good woman, kept to herself, but always waved when she saw him. I liked him instantly, honestly. Out there, you want to know your neighbor is decent, because there's nobody else around if something goes wrong. He offered to help me haul the bigger stuff to the road for pickup, and I took him up on it. We spent a few hours moving furniture, and he talked the whole time. Told me about his place, about his late wife, about how quiet it gets out there in the winter. Normal conversation. Nothing about him felt off. It was Sunday afternoon, going through a closet in the back bedroom, that I found the box. It was tucked behind some old coats, a shoebox with a rubber band around it gone brittle with age. Inside were photographs. Not the kind you'd expect in an old woman's closet. Pictures of Dale's property, taken from a distance, at all different times of day. Some from what looked like the tree line between the two houses. Dozens of them, going back what had to be years, based on how the trucks in his driveway changed over time. At first I thought maybe my aunt just liked photography, liked documenting the land. But then I found the notebook underneath the photos. Dates. Times, short notes in her handwriting. Truck gone 6:40 a.m., back 11 p.m. Lights on in barn past midnight again. New vehicle in driveway, unfamiliar plates. Going back almost 15 years. My aunt had been watching him, not the other way around. She'd been documenting his comings and goings like she was building a case. I sat there on the floor of that closet for a long time trying to figure out what it meant. Maybe she was just a lonely old woman with too much time and an overactive imagination. People get strange living alone that long. But some of the notes weren't just observations. Some of them were about sounds. Heard something from the barn again, 2 a.m. sounded like digging. Smell from his property, 3 days straight like something burning that shouldn't be. One entry, dated about 8 years back, just said, "I need to stop writing this down. If he ever finds this, I don't know what he'd do." That line sat wrong with me, because if he ever finds this, not if anyone finds this, him specifically. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept the box in the trunk of my car, not in the house, like some part of me didn't trust the walls to keep it safe. Around 11, headlights swept across the bedroom ceiling. A vehicle slow, moving up the driveway and then stopping. I looked out and it was Dale's truck, parked right where the drive met the road, engine off, lights on, just sitting there. He didn't get out, didn't come to the door. The truck just sat there for almost 20 minutes while I stood frozen at that window, and then it pulled away, back toward his place. The next morning I packed everything I could into my car faster than I've ever packed anything in my life. I left half my aunt's belongings still sitting in that house. I didn't care. When I passed Dale's property on the way out, he was standing at the end of his own driveway, coffee in hand, and he lifted it toward me like a little toast. Like nothing at all was strange about the night before. I called the county sheriff's office 2 days later, once I was back home and could think straight. I told them about the notebook, the photographs, the truck sitting there in the dark. They said they'd look into it, took a report, and that was mostly the last I heard. No follow-up, no news. I still don't know what my aunt saw out there for 15 years, or what he might have realized about how much she'd written down. The house is still sitting empty. I haven't gone back and I don't plan to anytime soon. Every time I think about listing it, I think about that shoebox, and I think about Dale lifting his coffee like a toast, like he already knew exactly what I'd found. Some houses you inherit. Some you inherit along with everything the last owner was too afraid to tell anyone. If these countryside horror stories made you think twice about quiet back roads, lonely farmhouses, or the silence that stretches across open fields after dark, like this video, which of these three stories stayed with you the most? Let me know in the comments. I read them all. If you enjoyed this collection and want more horror stories, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe.